I'm going to take you through Michael's IEP, and throughout the IEP, I'm going to explain the different components to you. So on this page, this is the demographics page. So what you would do in an IEP meeting is you would pull this page up and you would talk to the parents and say, is all this information correct? And they can look over it. It contains the parent and guardian name and address, a phone number, your local education agency, LEA. And what an LEA is that's your school district. Anticipated year of graduation, age, and then anticipated duration of services and programs. So if you see the anticipated duration and then the implementation date would be July 24th. And the anticipated duration is July 14th of 2021. So an IEP is in effect for one calendar year, and you have to hold another IEP meeting before the end of that year. So the services started July 24th of 2020, and the duration is July 14th, 2021. So it has to be before the duration is up. So it has to be any time before July 14th. All right, so moving on to the next page. This is the IEP team signatures. So if you see below, it says role, parent. So that's if a person would have a mother and a father, or two parents or guardians. The student, the regular ed teacher, special ed teacher, local ed agency rep, career and tech ed rep, and community agency rep, and then teacher of the gifted. So if you look here, you have to have in an IEP meeting, to make it legal, you have to include the parent, the regular ed teacher, the local ed agency rep, and the special education teacher. The local ed agency rep is typically the special education director in the school district. It could be a principal. Some schools will have guidance counselors do this. This person should be well versed in the district functions, such as the business office, and also in the function of special education. So it should be somebody who is well versed and knows special education laws. Something else that I want to note here is another role. So it also depends on the individual child, because it's an individualized education program. So who you invite to the meeting, the ones that I stated, those are the legal necessary people that need to be at the meeting. If a student would, let's say, have physical therapy services, it would be necessary to invite the physical therapist to the IEP meeting, because they would be giving input into the IEP and writing different strategies and goals into the IEP. So you want to include them as well. This next page is the procedural safeguards notice. So before the IEP meeting would have even started, you would be sending home this notice. It's called the procedural safeguard notice, and it talks about the parents' rights in the special education process. It goes through the due process procedures, and so you need to give them that document before the IEP even starts. And then they would sign off of that on that, stating that they received that. The medical assistance program billing notice. So this is this is signing off that a parent agrees that the school district could bill medical assistance if needed. It has nothing to do with the parent's insurance. It has nothing to do with the parent, any monetary value to the parent. That's what I always stated to the parent, that this does not affect your insurance. This is just that we can bill them for certain services. So some services that could be billed for would be physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language support. This page is the special considerations that you must check off before developing the IEP. And then if any of these are selected as yes, then they must be addressed in the IEP. So for example, this one, is the student blind or visually impaired? No. Is the student deaf or hard of hearing? No. Does the student have communication needs? Yes. So because this says yes here, there must be something addressed in the IEP. So if you see right next to it here, present levels, specially designed instruction, and this is also referred to as SDI, annual goals, etc. So you'll be seeing in the IEP speech services and how they're going to be addressed to best meet the needs of this child. Does the student need assistive technology devices and or services? Yes. So the student needs must be addressed in the IEP, just like I stated before. Does the student have limited English proficiency? No. Does the student exhibit behaviors that impede his or her learning or that of others? And that's no. So if this would be selected as yes, then the IEP team has to develop a positive behavior support plan. And that's based on an assessment. It's actually called a functional assessment of behavior. And it utilizes positive behavior techniques. So this would be written in the IEP, in the present levels. There would be goals. And then also the SDI would also include items in there about behaviors and how to increase those positive behaviors. This is the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. You might hear this referred to as PLOP, so P-L-O-P, and that's present levels of performance. So that's just a heads up on that acronym. There's a lot of acronyms in special education, so but if you look here, it will talk about the present levels of achievement. So this could be recent evaluations, formative assessments, any assessment that happens in the classroom, and then progress toward their goals that were stated in the IEP. So if you go through there, you can read all of Michael's present levels of performance and then what's included in there. This area is present levels of functional performance. And this just talks about that he lives at home with both parents and 2 other siblings, that English is spoken in the home. He has a diagnosis of developmental delay, and he did receive OT, PT, speech services. So this is all functional performance right here. All right, still the present levels. This is present levels related to current post-secondary transition goals, and this is if the student is 14 or younger. So there's nothing there, but the parent concerns for enhancing the education of the student, that would be any documentation that you would have. Now, of course, it should be related to the IEP, but if you see below, it says in a phone conversation on August 7th, 2016, parents expressed the following. So they went through there. Then there are questions, how the student's disability affects involvement and progress in the general ed curriculum, and that would need to be answered. If you go below, it has strengths, Michael's strengths. So then you would list strengths that Michael has. You can read through those. And then the next one is academic, developmental, and functional needs related to the student's disabilities. These are usually just related to whenever spoken and in conversation as strengths and needs. So you'll see all of his needs. Any need that you see here needs to be addressed in the IEP in some fashion. So you'll see throughout the IEP that any need that is here is addressed in the specially designed instruction, or SDI, in the goals, or in a related service. The next section is the transition services. So this is required for students age 14 or younger, if determined appropriate by the IEP team. The student can attend the meeting, and it is definitely appropriate and needed if the student is 14 years or older to attend the meeting, because you're going to be talking about transition to post-secondary placements. I guess placements is a bad word, but post-secondary training or education, or anything that they're doing after school. If a student goes to VOTEC, then somebody would be there from VOTEC, or the transition coordinator, or career services would be there. All right, so you'll see all the post-secondary ed training and goals. All right, the next section is participation in state and local assessments. So this is the PSSAs, or the Keystone exams. If you see down below, it does say state assessments. And if they're not assessed, then you would do a check mark in either of these. And then below that is PSSAs. So if the student is in grades 3 through 8, it explains all the levels. So 3 through 8 would be math. Science is administered in grades 4 and 8. Reading administered in 3 through 8. Writing administered in grades 5 and 8. And ELA. So this would be where you would determine if they would need accommodations. And I'm not going to really get into that, because that's a lengthy discussion on accommodations for the PSSAs. But PDE, so the Pennsylvania Department of Education, they came up with acceptable accommodations for the PSSAs, and you have to follow their guidelines on what accommodations are acceptable. So if that student would need that, you would select with accommodations, and then accommodations to be provided. In this section, for sure, you need to be careful on what they actually need and what you're allowed to accommodate on the PSSAs. The Keystone exam, that replaces the 11th grade PSSAs. So the student must participate by 11th grade. So each of these tested subject areas, algebra, literature, and biology, they all have trigger courses in high school. So if you take Keystone Algebra 1, that's a trigger course for the Keystone exam. And this is the same thing, like with accommodations or without. And it's the same setup as the PSSAs. So you need to look at those appropriate accommodations and allowable accommodations on the PSSAs. All right, so this one, student will participate in the PASA. Now this is the alternative system of assessments, Pennsylvania. So this student will not be taking the PSSAs, he would be taking the PASA. And then it explains why the student would need to take the PASA. After reviewing the 6 PASA criteria, the IEP team found that the student is eligible. and then how the student's performance on PASA will be documented as videotape.